how to be a good role model for your children. Something that sounds so cliche, I know, yet something that can be quite difficult to do, especially if you're someone who hasn't had good role models yourself growing up. So what I'm going to share with you here, and we're going to go very deep, is what I personally do to be a good role model in the eyes of my daughters, and some of the common mistakes that I see a lot of parents make. The first mistake being sacrificing everything for my children. And this is pumped left and right with mainstream advice, right? It's all about the kids. Sacrifice everything for your kids. Your kids are your purpose. Now, don't get me wrong. It is all about the kids. However, if you truly care about your children and the relationship you have with them, you cannot sacrifice everything. They cannot become your only purpose. Otherwise, think about it. Say everything is about the kids. That's all you do, right? You sacrifice everything that has to do with you, and it's all about the kids, all about the kids. Everything I do is for the kids. You're waking up, it's for the kids. It's for the kids. It's for the kids. Well, two things will happen. On one hand, with time, your relationship with them will suffer, and resentment in a very subtle way will start seeping in, because after a period of time, you're going to start, and this usually happens unconsciously at first, blaming them. I miss my old life. I miss my life before kids, when I could pursue my purpose and do things for me. Now that I have children, it's all about them, and I have nothing. I just live for them. I'm just a slave for them. And although you love them, it's still a slave dynamic, and resentment can kick in. I would have done this if it weren't for them. These kids, I love them, but I was doing so many things for me that brought me joy before them. Why are they doing this to me? And that resentment will poison your relationship with them. Now, that's one thing. The other thing that'll happen is if you think of, from their perspective, viewing you as the parent, what kind of role model are you? What do you embody? If everything is for them, they're going to look at that and say, oh, well, that's what my parent has going for them, I guess. They just work for me. They don't really do anything for themselves. They don't really have a purpose. They don't have any passions. They just kind of wake up and go through the grind. And what kind of role model / inspiration is that? Is that what you want them to aspire to? Well, I guess I got to be the slave. The slave is the goal. No, you want them to view you as a hero. You want to embody ultimately what you want them to model. So think of the ideal life you would like for your child, right? The ideal life, well then who would they be in that ideal life? And embody that. Do you want them to have a role model who has no purpose, who has no passion? Well, hey, if they see that, most likely it might be hard for them to find their purpose or passion. They'll follow your lead. Do you want to be just burnt out all the time? No joy in your life, just task, 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 and that's what they see? There was actually a client I was coaching a couple months ago. She was in her 40s and her kids were in their teens. And she came on the coaching. This is when it comes to letting go deep in her work. And she's like, when they were younger, I sacrificed everything for them, right? So she made this mistake. She fell into this trap. And I would do everything, right? And my whole life was centered around them. And she took it a bit to the extreme where she's like, everything had to be clean. So I was always cleaning up after them. Everything had to be perfect. And I had no hobbies. I lost touch with my friends. I didn't go out. I didn't do things that were fun. I didn't do anything for me. It was all about them, right? So once more, is that the example you want to set for them? Never go out, no friends, just ultimately being their slave, right? But she also said, now that they're older, I realize this pattern and I'm trying to break it and I want to spend more time with them. However, now that they're older, they don't want to spend time with me, right? So she kind of missed those earlier years where they do want to spend time with you because she sacrificed everything. And ultimately, she took it to such an extreme that she even sacrificed the relationship she had with them because it was just, I'm a slave, I'll be your slave, I'll be your slave. Right? Not playing with them, everything's just taking care of them, tending to them. And you simply cannot do that, in my opinion. Okay? Everything still is about the kids, but part of that means your kids having a good role model. And once more, it means, in my opinion, viewing you as a hero. So that's what I personally tried to do. Of course, I'm always there for them. Of course, I'm in slave mode at times. Of course. But I also want to show them that I am more than just that. I also want to show them that, hey, look, here I am working. And one, I also want to show them that I have a very positive relationship with work, right? As opposed to the classic conditioning, enjoy your younger years. You'll see these are the best time. This is the best time of your life. When you become an adult, it's all downhill. Oh, you're not enjoying high school? Well, you better, because it's only downhill from here. I remember hearing that, and for myself, my high school experience wasn't very pleasant. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I hate high school. I don't like things right now. And you're saying that it's only going to get worse, right? You'll see a lot of adults too complain about their jobs. Parents complain about their jobs. And once more, in terms of this role model mindset, what is it telling your child? A job is not something that you like. As opposed to, and once more, this is what I try to do, show them that, hey, I'm working, but I love working. Look at what I'm doing. Oh, I can't wait to work. It's so fulfilling. Embodying what you want them to model. I want them to have a positive relationship with work, not view it as some chore or just this thing that you're like, oh, I got to do it to pay the bills. No, it's much more than that. I also want to show them just how fulfilling it is and how I feel just being on my purpose and having this thing that drives you. Now, what if I sacrificed all of that? I'm like, no purpose, no fun. I'm just the kids. They would never see that. The same with still having time for you and carving that out. Still going out and seeing friends, still going out and doing things. Because once more, they will model it. Oh, my dad always stays home, has no friends, right? My daughters are excited when they see and meet my friends. Like, oh, daddy's friend's coming over. Oh, we're going to see daddy's friend. Oh, they're so excited. So you can't cut off everything. And once more, it's still about the children, but it's not black and white. And it can be tricky, not taking away from that. I know for myself, when my first daughter was born, my whole world got shaken up. Now, in many ways, right, certain ways that I talk about in the first episode of this podcast where it's not easy. But another thing that got shaken up is my purpose, right? For the longest time, and I've always been someone who's just really purpose-driven. That was my reason to live, right? My raison d'être. However, as soon as she was born, it ceased to be the top priority, which is interesting. It's always been the top priority. Work always has, because I love it, right? Helping people, sharing this, it's what I live for. It was the number one thing. And suddenly I have a daughter and poof, she's number one. And there was an adjustment period where it's like, whoa, this is no longer the number one thing. Now it's still a huge component. It's a number two. It's right up there, but it's no longer number one. And I could feel also the temptation to be like, whoa, because I'm also someone who's just all in, right? I'm all in on whatever I do. So I'm like, oh, this is my new purpose. Let's go all in. And I could feel the pull away from work, which is, again, number two, peak fulfillment. But I could feel the pull away from it. And there were even times at first where I'd be feeling sometimes guilty too. I'm like, oh, I'm working, but I should, that's my number one purpose. Screw this. Let's do this. Let's go hang out with them. Let's be with them. And this was a lesson early on. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What kind of role model am I then being for my child? Right? And part of being a role model is showing your child all the different aspects of life. And once more, what you would ideally want them to model, right? And remember, children, this is important, technically adults too, are like sponges. They're taking everything in. Everything. If you're even, and this is a subtle one, we think that being a role model is only in the things that we do. Right? Look, I'm doing the work. Look. But it's also in the being, not just the doing, where they're forming their bearings on the world. And I'm going to talk about this. We're going to go very deep. But if you think of their whole process growing up, especially the process of socialization, right? Learning how to function in the world, they're forming their bearings. They're like, what's this thing? All right, I'm thrown into this thing called life. What is it? How do I deal with this? And they're constantly just taking in information, right? It's like, okay, this thing is hard. Interesting. What is life? I don't know what life is. What is being? How should I be? And they're going to look at you. And if, as an example, you're someone who's very stressed yourself and you're always stressed and always on edge, they don't know that that's good or bad, right? Good or bad. They're going to look at it and say, okay, well, I guess the way to be is to be stressed. And they're going to model that. This is also why really diving deep within yourself, doing deep inner work, letting go is so crucial, so that they don't model things that might have, you could say, negatively affected your life and that will then negatively affect their life. If you're always stressed, that's the standard you set. That is the role model you are. Let's be stressed. So it's not just in the doing, it's also in the being. And it's much more powerful, this also links to marketing, to show someone something as opposed to tell them something, right? In terms of being a role model, show them. They have to see it as opposed to you telling them. The same as if you want them to do something, a lot of parents go, hey, you should do this. You know what? You've had enough screen time. You should read a book. You need to start reading books, as if that is going to work. A much more, you could say, powerful approach, and this is something a friend actually told me before I had my daughter, while my wife was still pregnant. He has twins, and he's like, one thing I started doing is whenever we're together, they're playing, I'll sit on the couch and I'll start reading a book myself. So he shows it. And right after that, the kids are like, oh, sit next to him, and they pull up their own book too, and they also start reading. So you're always a role model, whether you like it or not, as a parent. You're the most important role model, especially at a young age. And everything, like, you can't escape. It's not like, hey, do you want to be a role model? You are. So a lot of this is becoming aware and then making the necessary changes. But showing is always much more powerful than telling. And be careful too with social media. If what you're showing them is you scroll in your phone all day, well, that's also setting something for them to model. That's setting the standard. Oh, I guess the way to be in this thing called life is to just plunge my head right into a tablet, right into a phone. That's the way to be. Even if you're hanging out with them, oh, that's fun. Oh, you're playing with that? Oh, cool. You're teaching them that. That's what they're going to model. That's how they work. Okay, if you're a parent of two, you'll also really see this in the way that the youngest child will model the eldest child, all right? Like my daughters, the youngest one will want to do everything that the eldest one is doing, even things that I don't even notice, like subtle things. It's like she's doing it, and then I notice it. I'm like, oh, like this happens. Again, they're like sponges, every little detail, sucking it in, trying to make a sense of life. Okay, how do I be in life? And you have to set the standard as a parent. And when I say, to be clear as well, be the hero, right? Be a hero. And it's also interesting how very few parents actually accomplish this, right? A lot of people, if they think of their parents, there's of course good things that they take, like, oh, there's that and these traits, okay, great. But very few people will talk about their parents as heroes, right? In most cases, someone's parent is an anti-example. It's, oh yeah, it taught me what I don't want to be. It taught me what I don't want. As opposed to, oh yeah, I want to be like that. Oh, it set a great example. So when I say be the hero, it also means showing them how you deal with hard times and not hiding that, right? When we think hero, we think someone who's always perfect, right? Someone who is always happy in a stateful bliss, someone who never loses their cool, never loses their temper, someone who is never triggered, someone who is never sad, so on and so forth. There's actually someone I know who will say that, my children have never seen me when I'm angry. They've never seen me angry. They don't even know that I can get angry. And again, on paper, you'd think, oh, well, that's great, right? Oh, your kids never saw you angry. That must be so great. But once more, if you put yourself in their shoes, what could happen? Well, say you're the child. As a human, you experience anger. It's healthy and natural to experience anger. If you don't experience anger, it's not healthy. Every single emotion serves a purpose, right? Every emotion is valuable. It sends data. Anger is sending the data that a boundary has been crossed, that something is not okay. You should feel it. It'd actually be bad if something happens, someone crosses your boundary and you're not angry. So it's helpful. But putting yourself in that child's perspective, okay, they experience anger, right? Especially when you're young. It's like you're screaming, so on and so forth. And then you look and you see that your father never does that. Well, once more, it could get the child to think, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm trying to model this, but my dad is never angry. I've never seen him angry, never seen him scream, which, again, probably happened, but, no one's perfect like that. But hey, maybe, benefit of the doubt. But say, like, oh, they never screamed, well, something's wrong with me. And they're going to disown anger, and it will lead to suppression and repression and low self-esteem. So what I personally do is I show them all of it. If I'm angry, I'm not going to hide it. I'll let them see it, but then I'll also show them how I work through it in a healthy way. I'll show them. I'll show them how I dive deep, how I let go of it, right? The same with letting go. People are like, well, how do I teach my kids about letting go? Embody it. They should also see you doing that. I show them too when I'm sad. I show them ultimately, and this is my personal view as a parent, it's show them everything about life, all the facets of life, all the emotions, and ultimately teach them how to go through it, how to deal with it, as opposed to sheltering them from it. If you're never angry around your kids, you're sheltering them from anger. If you're never sad around your kids, you hide that, you're sheltering them from sadness. If you never have disputes or arguments around your kids, you also shelter them from that. It's like, hey, it's as if, say, my wife and I were like, hey, let's put on the happy front. Yet we're having an argument about something. No, don't hide that. But then it's have a healthy argument and show them what a healthy argument looks like. So being the hero also doesn't mean don't be perfect, just be perfect. It's no, your job is to be the hero in terms of showing them the healthiest way to deal with all aspects of life, but don't shelter them from certain aspects of life. Okay. Now, zooming in on this, because we're going deeper, let's bring your awareness to their experience and reality, because it's so important to get this, right? When we try to put ourselves in their shoes, we always project the adult version, right? Our adult mentality and perception into them. And we're like, well, how would I deal there? But you really have to understand their experience, having a very limited perspective as a child. So as I talked about, they come into this world and they're forming their map of reality. And every single person has this, right? Life is just so much input that we all create some map, some understanding of the world, right? A series of assumptions that allow us to ultimately function in life. Right, so you're going to form your map. Okay, this fabric here is hard. You touch the stove, oof, it's hot. Okay, now I learn. So you're getting your bearings. You're creating this map. And this is where a child will start forming core beliefs. Okay, you can think of these beliefs as being at the foundation of this map. So the way that we make assumptions is, well, if this is true, then knowing that this is true, then that is true. Then knowing that both these things are true, then this is true, then this is true, then this is true. So think of it as there's a core assumption that happens here at the bottom, and then there's new assumptions, right? A core belief, and there are new beliefs that build on that. It's like a tree in a way. And these core beliefs happen at a young age. Now, later on, these core beliefs are also what lead to a lot of self-sabotage in adults, where they try to stay congruent to these core beliefs, right? Self-sabotage, we think, I'm screwing myself over. No, you're not. A part of you is giving yourself exactly what you want, yet you're staying congruent to one of these beliefs. And I'll give an example after this. But that's their experience. That's their reality. Okay? They're forming all these beliefs. They're creating their map of the world. And they will form these beliefs in two ways. One is through firsthand experience, like the stove example that I gave, right? They touch it. Ooh, it's hot. Now you learn, right? There's the map. Let's not touch that again. So you're forming your bearings. But if you had to form your entire bearings just through firsthand experience, you wouldn't be able to, because there's only so much that you can do, so much that you can experience. So the other way that people form these core beliefs is through secondhand experience, where, hey, if someone else has already learned this, let me learn from them. Let me learn from their mistakes, their lessons. So we're always pinging externally. And as a child, you're a sponge. You're taking it all in from anyone around you. Okay? And what will determine if something input-wise enters and becomes a core belief? Well, it has to pass three filters. One is how congruent the person is, right? So we can always sense incongruency, right? When you could say thoughts, words, actions don't align. So say hypothetically, you've never clapped your hands and you've never heard someone clap your hands. Let's take an example, right? So you don't know this. And someone came up to you and they're like, hey, if you put your hands together like that, it's going to make a sound. But you just sense they're a little shifty, a little dodgy in the vibe, a little incongruent. Like, hey, if you, clap your hands, it'll make a sound. Like, I don't know. But if it is congruent, hey, if you clap your hands, it'll make a sound. That'll pass the first filter. The second is how certain are they, right? If they come up to you, hey, if you clap your hands, it'll make a sound. Won't pass the filter. Hey, if you clap your hands, it'll make a sound. Okay, congruent and certain. And the third filter, if it passes the first two, is how much authority does this belief have, right? So in terms of authority, well, as a child who has a lot of authority, parents. If your parent tells you something, well, they have a lot of authority. Well, they're certain, they're congruent, must be true, and we take it on as true. Even though there's no experience firsthand, you will take it on as true if it passes those three filters. So parents is one, teachers, a lot of authority, and the third big source is the classroom. Because a lot of authority also happens through social proof. If a lot of people believe something, well, then it must be true. It has authority. So they're going to be forming a lot of beliefs through that. Parents, teachers, and classroom. And once more, it becomes the foundation of these belief trees. Now, become aware, and this is what I'm constantly doing myself, of on your end as a parent, what beliefs are you teaching your child, again, through secondhand experience? What is getting conditioned into them ultimately? And is it beneficial? Yes or no? Because the child doesn't know. The child's just taking in, oh, okay, this, right? As an example, they might, as a core belief, ask themselves, well, what is love? Right? What is love? What is love? What's a healthy relationship? Now, what's the example that's right in front of their faces? Well, the relationships their parents have, right? There we go. What's their relationship? How are my parents together in a relationship? How do they love each other? And from the child's perspective, say they're growing up in a household where both parents are fighting all the time. There's always a lot of drama. Well, what's the child going to do? Okay, well, they're very congruent and certain in their fighting. They have a lot of authority. They are my parents. I guess love equals fighting. Core belief. Well, if this is true, if love equals fighting, then this is true, then this is true, then this is true, then this is true. The whole tree's built on it. And once more, back to self-sabotage. Here's an example. How often do you hear this? I keep falling for toxic partners. All my relationships tend to be very dramatic. We keep fighting. Oh, why do I keep falling for the bad person, etc., etc.? Well, hey, if that's your definition of love, you're going to act in ways that are congruent to this inner map. And that's self-sabotage. Why does this keep happening to me? To stay congruent. And it's scary later on in life to, one, it's very hard to become aware of these core beliefs, and it's very scary to let go of them, because when you remove them, the whole tree crumbles. So catching this early on in your children is very crucial. What are the core beliefs? What am I programming into them? Because you're a parent. You're one of the top influences in their life. Of course you're programming them. Whether you're conscious or not, you can either let it happen unconsciously and hope for the best, or try to take some control. Okay. Now, the same, by the way, with this example, say the relationship is the parents separated, right? Divorced, or so on and so forth. They might say, oh, well, love relationships is abandonment. And they keep going into relationships later on in life with people who cheat on them, who leave them, so on and so forth. Or perhaps the parents, they're together, but there's no romance left, and they're just friends, right? It's just very platonic. Well, then they might find themselves later on drawn to relationships like that. And again, it's repeating the same dynamics. So here it's asking yourself, in terms of what I'm doing, what beliefs might that program into them? In terms of what I'm saying, what beliefs might get programmed into them, right? A common one is, hey, we can't afford that. Oh, you want to go do that? Oh, that's too much money. We can't afford that. We can't afford that, right? That's not for us. Just saying something like that, think on a core belief, child sponge, we can't afford that. And say it's said even over multiple times. Well, core belief could be money's not for me. And then self-sabotage, push away money, push away opportunities, stay congruent to the identity who can't afford it. If you make money, now you're no longer that identity who can't afford it. So I got to push money away. Be aware of it. The same with emotions, right? If it's a household that's, say, very negative overall, they might shame a child who is positive, right? What are you so happy about? What are you smiling about? Can't you see what we're going through as a family? Well, core belief there, being happy is not allowed. Being happy is not okay. And later on in life, very hard to be happy. So become aware. And a good question to ask yourself, and this is what I do, is say someone were to spend time with you in your life, a stranger, how would they come out of it? How would it condition them? Would they come out of it spending time with you in a positive way, right? Will they come out enhanced or diminished? Will they learn something? Will it be for the best or for the worst? Will they come out better or bitter? Something to think about, because that's what your child is going through. Another one could be, how would you do as a coach? Maybe you think, I'm not a coach. You're the coach. Everyone is a coach when it comes to being a parent. That's part of it. If you don't think you're a good coach, well, chances are that might be happening unconsciously. So bringing your awareness is always step one. What are the beliefs in this household? What are the beliefs that we have in this family in general? What are the values that we have? Also getting clear on that, because that will get passed down. If someone new came here, how would they leave? What would get programmed into them? Now, let's go a level deeper here. Through this process of socialization, right, figuring out the world, every single person creates a split within. So this is important. And again, we're going deep. No matter how well you do as a parent, you'll never be perfect, and every single human creates an inner split where there is the, you could say, acceptable you and the unacceptable you. The unacceptable you isn't all things that you could say are generally labeled as unacceptable. It's what you labeled as unacceptable. And ultimately, it's where you place things that you suppressed or repressed, right? Based on that split, we then hide those things. So we put on this mask, this front. We try to, again, control how people perceive us. We're always scared that they're going to see through the front and see all those things. And on a purely, once more, self-esteem level, you just feel like you're not good enough. Why? Because it's not okay to be all that is you. You can only be the acceptable you. So we all create a split. The bigger the split, the lower the level of self-esteem. Now, understanding how this split happens and the different components is also very crucial in terms of how you're going to parent your child, in my opinion. So a few things to understand here is, one, when your child comes into this world, they have to learn about the world. And part of learning about the world isn't just, if I touch the stove, my hand burns. It's also learning the rules of society, right? The rules, the traditions, the guidelines. So that's one component. That's the process of socialization. The second component is the way that most parents teach those rules, guidelines, and traditions to their children is through punishment and reward. If the child follows the guidelines, they get rewarded. If they don't, they get punished. And the third component is that, as we talked about a lot here, a child has a very limited perspective, right? They don't see the world the way that you see the world. From a young age, when they're born, they can't even see that far. Later on, they don't know what the world looks like. They don't know what different countries are. The entire world for them, as an example, is the classroom. That's all that they know. The entirety of the planet is this classroom from the child's perspective. Right? So they have, once more, a limited perspective, and they also depend on whoever is raising them to survive. Now, understanding all of this, let's take an example where you're a child and the teacher asks a question in class, and you speak up and you say the wrong answer. There's the example. And you voluntarily speaked up. You raised your hand and you gave the wrong answer. And say some of the kids in class laughed a bit. Ha! Ha! Wrong answer, right? How might a child interpret that? One, okay, I'm not accepted, approved of in the classroom. Now, from their perspective, it could be the world. Their experience of that could be as if they're getting canceled by the entire world. I'm about to be ostracized from society, right? So limited perspective, that's how they see it. It's not okay. I'm going to be kicked out of the world. If I get kicked out of the world, ostracized, I will die. Not true, but based on the perspective. And that will lead to suppression, repression. In this case, it could be that they take speaking up and they label that as not acceptable, and it goes in the split. Now, later on, as an adult, speak up. Hey, go speak in front of a group of people. Go say hi to that person. They can't. Because that aspect, speaking up, not okay, threatens my survival. Now, does it? No. But it's based on the perspective. Another example is, say you're a child and you're at a restaurant with your parents and you start being very loud and they tell you, hey, be quiet, be quiet. In that tone, be quiet, be quiet. Limited perspective as a kid, you might see that and interpret it as them actually yelling full force, like, be quiet. Right? That's how you got to interpret it. But based on your limited perspective, you might also view that as, my parents don't love me in this moment. They don't love me. Now, do they? Yeah, I hope. But we always view it, even though it's perhaps an unconditional love, as a child, we always view it as conditional. Approval, reward is when I'm loved. Disapproval, punishment is when I'm not loved. So in this case, you're learning the rules of society, you get punished. My parents don't love me right now. If they don't love me, what could happen? They could abandon me. If they abandon me, I die because I can't survive on my own. I depend on them for my survival. So just a situation like that can put the child in ultimately this life-threatening, survival kicks in. It's like, I got to just disown this. Can't be loud. And you disown it. So anything that ultimately, you could say, threatens the child's survival in that sense, leads to suppression and repression. Suppression is done more consciously, right? Okay, loud, never again, right? You disown an aspect. Repression is done unconsciously, or more so when you could disown an entire experience. Like the entire experience never happened. That didn't happen, right? This would be called a traumatic experience, right? Something that also every single person alive, every single child will experience, trauma in life. Now, we always think trauma, we think of the extreme examples, or trauma with a capital T, right? Like violence, so on and so forth. But trauma is ultimately any experience that is just not acceptable. It could be an experience that's too intense to handle, to even process, an experience where simply acknowledging that experience destroys every core belief we have about ourselves, and that just like, not okay, never happened, not me. That's what we do with the split. So that there will also enhance the split. So this happens to every human. Every human forms core beliefs. Every human creates a split. Every human experiences trauma, right? Again, back to limited child's perspective, you could argue that in that moment, even saying, hey, be quiet, it's like from the kid, it's like, I'm kicking you out, you're gonna die. It can be traumatic. Because trauma also depends on the person's perspective in terms of who's experiencing it. So everyone has that split. And as I talked about earlier in this episode, become aware of the beliefs, also become aware of, this split and what experiences might be too intense that my child experienced. So it's trying to become aware of ultimately what might trigger that, survival instinct inside of them. Now, as soon as I just said this, by the way, in my mind, it just flashed. I'm like, people are now going to misinterpret this. Do not take this too far. We talked about in the last episode when it comes to gentle parenting, how people take it way too far, over the top. Everything becomes a big deal. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, okay, now every single experience, right, every second of the day, oh my God, my child experienced trauma right now. Oh, is it too overwhelming? Is it threatening their survival? Could it lead to that from their perspective? No. But look for the big ones, the experiences in their life that have a lot of charge. Identify those. And you could say my personal view, the rule that I follow when it comes to this, by the way, because the other trap is people are like, well, they're going to experience trauma, I'm going to shelter them from that. What I personally do is protect at all costs, but don't shelter. Protect, but don't shelter. Meaning, understanding that everyone is going to experience trauma, that's, again, with not a capital T, I hope. It's like lower T trauma. Everyone's going to experience it. It's part of life. It's not about sheltering someone from that, because you can't escape it. It's part of, once more, the process of socialization. Sheltering your kid, creating this safe space, is delaying the inevitable of them discovering more of the world, and then it'll happen. So it's not about sheltering. It's about protecting, meaning protect your child, but understand that your child will have those experiences. And if you're able to identify them, and more importantly, overall, teach your child how to handle those situations in a healthy way, aka process them, let go of them, as opposed to suppress and repress, it'll minimize the split within. And that's what I personally tried to do. I understand this split's going to happen, but I want to minimize it. If you think of a reservoir of things that you're stuffing down, I want to add less to that reservoir. Because most people, they've just been adding their entire lives. Now they're adults and they have to process and let go of all of that now, as opposed to just stop the adding up of it. Stop the split, more split, more split. It's like, just stop it. And that's teaching your child, and this is what I do, how to let go. Now, people ask me, oh, but your eldest daughter's, she's about to turn 4. How do you teach her how to let go? Well, it's understanding at a most basic level that letting go is embracing what you're feeling as opposed to moving away from it. We talked about before, big rule, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. I always come back to that with my parenting. It's okay to experience what you're experiencing. That's the message, the intention at all times. So if something happened that's just very overwhelming, right? You're like, okay, let's sit and feel through it. Let's not try to escape it. Let's not try to distract ourselves, numb ourselves. Let's stay with it. And what I personally taught them at this point is just deep breaths. Like in those moments, say, where they're sad or angry, it's not like, oh, you're angry here, to do this, let's think of that. Hey, do you want some TV? Do you want some food? Like, none of that. It's, hey, It's okay to feel what you're feeling. I'm going to be here with you as you feel it, and teach them how to ultimately lean into it. Because whatever you resist persists. If they resist feeling it, they stuff it down. And that's what we all do, right? We design our lives as adults constantly stuffing down and escaping that. So here it's from a young age. Start with the deep breaths, and then later on I'll teach them how to let go. For the moment too, back to being the hero, I embody that. They see me let go. They see me embody it. But yeah, these are, back to once more, be a role model, be a hero for your children. Some of the things that I personally follow, some things that I think is important to bring your awareness to, right? What conditioning am I bringing my child into? What's getting conditioned into her? Is it beneficial? Yes or no? They're sponges. Understand they'll learn the majority will come from secondhand experience, by the way, not first. They're going to learn a lot from it. What are they learning from you? Understanding their perspective, limited perspective, understanding their reality, understanding the split, which affects self-esteem. It's all of that. So easier said than done, but it all starts with awareness. Bring your awareness to it. And you get better at it. Never aim once more for perfection, and once more, not everything is a big deal. Don't take this too far. But it's swinging the pendulum. You could say if most people don't bring their awareness at all, it's, hey, let's bring it to at least a good middle. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time.